Most people think the hardest part building wealth is becoming a millionaire. They're wrong. The hardest part is reaching your first $100,000. Not because it's a large number, not because the math is complicated, but because of who you have to become to get there. I know because I remember exactly where I was when I crossed that line. I wasn't standing on a yacht. I wasn't popping champagne. I wasn't posting screenshots online. I was sitting alone in a small apartment at 11:43 p.m. The sink was full of dishes. The paint was peeling near the window, and my laptop battery was stuck at 12%. Outside, rain tapped softly against the glass. Inside, everything was quiet, except my heart. Because after 11 years of working, saving, investing, failing, restarting, sacrificing, and doubting myself, my net worth had finally crossed $100,000. 6 digits. A number that once felt impossible. A number I used to think only rich people reached. I stared at the screen, then refreshed it again. $100,014. I laughed, then I cried, because nobody else knew what that number really represented. To everyone else, it was just money. To me, it was proof. Proof that the system worked. Proof that patience worked. Proof that I wasn't wasting my life. And yet, the strange thing is, the money wasn't what changed everything. It was what happened afterward, because nobody tells you this. The first 100,000 isn't valuable because of the amount. It's valuable because of what it teaches you and what it unlocks. When I was 22, I believed wealth happened quickly. Every headline seemed to confirm it. Somebody made millions in crypto. Somebody sold a startup. Somebody got lucky buying a stock. Every success story felt immediate, instant, explosive. I thought money moved fast. Then reality arrived. Reality looked like a used car. Reality looked like rent payments. Reality looked like student loans. Reality looked like watching my bank account rise $50 one week, then fall $100 the next. At 23, I had saved my first $1,000. I felt invincible. A few months later, an emergency erased it, back to zero. At 24, I reached 5,000. Then my transmission failed, back down again. Every time I climbed, life pushed me backward, and after a while, I began wondering whether wealth was something reserved for other people. People with connections, people with trust funds, people who started ahead, not people like me. One evening, I found an old notebook. The cover was cracked. The corners were bent. Inside was a goal I had written years earlier, a simple sentence. One day, I will have $100,000 invested. I laughed when I saw it. At the time I wrote it, I barely had enough money to fill my gas tank. Yet, somehow, that younger version of me believed it was possible. I stared at the handwriting, and suddenly it felt like a letter from a stranger who still believed, a stranger who hadn't been disappointed yet. That notebook became my reminder. Every month, no matter what happened, I invested something. Sometimes it was $500, sometimes $200, sometimes $50, sometimes only $20. But I never stopped because I realized something important. The amount mattered less than the habit, and habits are where wealth is born. Years passed. Nothing dramatic happened. No viral business, no lottery ticket, no miracle stock, no overnight success. Just repetition. Again, and again, and again, the same boring process. Work, save, invest, repeat. Most people quit because the journey feels invisible. The first few years are almost insulting. You work hard, you save diligently, you invest consistently, and your money barely moves. It feels broken, like planting a tree that refuses to grow. What you don't realize is that something is happening underground. Roots are forming. Systems are developing. Momentum is building. You just can't see it yet. And that's where most people walk away, right before the magic begins. The day I reached $50,000 felt important, but it wasn't life-changing. The day I reached $70,000 felt exciting, but it wasn't life-changing. The day I reached $90,000 felt close, but still not life-changing. Then something strange happened. The money started growing faster, not because I was working harder, not because I was smarter, because the investments themselves began doing part of the work. For years, I had been carrying the entire load. Now, the portfolio was helping. A little, then a little more, then a little more. The snowball was finally rolling downhill. And that's when I understood something most people never realize. The first $100,000 is difficult because you're pushing the snowball uphill. Every step requires effort. Every dollar requires sacrifice. Every gain feels tiny. But once gravity takes over, everything changes. One winter evening, I sat with my father. The television was on. Neither of us was watching it. The room glowed with soft blue light. He looked older than I remembered. The lines around his eyes seemed deeper. The gray in his hair seemed brighter. And for the first time, I realized time was moving faster than I thought. He asked how work was going. I told him it was fine. Then he asked a question. A simple question. One I never forgot. Are you doing better than you were 10 years ago? I thought about it. 10 years earlier, I had almost nothing. Now I had nearly $100,000 invested. But that wasn't the answer that came to mind. Instead, I realized something deeper. I wasn't better because of the money. I was better because I had become disciplined, patient, resilient, calm. The account balance was merely evidence. The real wealth was a person I had become while building it. And somehow, that realization felt bigger than the number itself. A month after reaching $100,000, something happened. The market fell. Hard. Thousands disappeared. Fast. Years earlier, that would have terrified me. Years earlier, I would have panicked. Sold. Quit. Started over. But this time I felt different. Because the first 100,000 had taught me something priceless. Confidence. Not confidence in the market. Confidence in myself. I had already proven I could build wealth. If the money vanished tomorrow, I knew I could do it again. That knowledge changes a person. Because fear loses its power when you trust your process. Most people believe money creates freedom. They're only partially correct. Money doesn't create freedom. Money creates options. Freedom comes from the options. The ability to walk away from a toxic job. The ability to help family. The ability to survive unexpected setbacks. The ability to breathe. And the first 100,000 is often where those options begin appearing. Not because you're rich. You're not. But because you're finally building momentum. And momentum changes everything. I remember walking through a park shortly after crossing that milestone. Leaves drifted through the air. Children laughed somewhere in the distance. The sky was painted orange and gold. For years I had obsessed over numbers, balances, returns, percentages. But suddenly none of those things felt important. What felt important was time. Because wealth is really about buying back pieces of your life. Every invested dollar is a future minute you don't have to sell. Every asset is a future choice. Every contribution is a conversation with your future self. And standing there among the falling leaves, I realized my future self had finally started answering back. Years later, reaching higher milestones felt different. 200,000, 500,000, 1 million. Each number mattered. But none felt as meaningful as the first 100,000. Because every milestone after that was built on a foundation already proven. The first 100,000 is special because it transforms belief into evidence. Before it, you're hoping. After it, you know. Before it, wealth feels theoretical. After it, wealth feels real. Before it, you're following advice. After it, you're living proof. And that distinction changes everything. If you're watching this today with $500 invested, or 5,000, or 10,000, you may feel behind. You may feel frustrated. You may feel invisible. You may wonder if it's worth continuing. I understand. I've been there. I've stared at tiny balances. I've questioned the process. I've felt like nothing was happening. But let me tell you something. The early years are supposed to feel slow. That's not failure. That's how wealth is built. Quietly, patiently, almost invisibly, until one day, the results become impossible to ignore. Somewhere tonight, someone will invest their first $50. Someone will open their first brokerage account. Someone will choose saving over spending. Someone will decide their future matters more than today's impulse. And they won't realize it. But that tiny decision may be the beginning of everything. Not because $50 changes a life, but because habits do. And habits become years. Years become portfolios. Portfolios become freedom. Freedom becomes legacy. The night I crossed $100,000, I closed my laptop. The rain had stopped. The apartment was silent. The room looked exactly the same. Nothing outside had changed. The walls were the same. The furniture was the same. The city was the same. Yet, somehow, everything felt different. Because for the first time in my life, I understood that wealth wasn't a destination. It was a process that rewards patience, a process that rewards consistency, a process that rewards people willing to keep going long after the excitement disappears. And as I looked out the window into the darkness, I realized the first $100,000 had given me something far more valuable than money. It had given me belief. And once belief becomes certainty, the future never looks the same again. Because the first $100,000 doesn't change your bank account. It changes your understanding of what's possible. And that changes everything.